سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سبحان الله. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سورة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء. يا نور يا قدوس، يا نور يا قدوس، يا نور يا قدوس، يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهتك العصام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تقطع الرجاء. اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفع بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك وكرمك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغرب يا الله. ثانية صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا، ولا لقبائحي ساترا، ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك. ظلمت نفسي ظلمت نفسي ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي، وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي، كم من قبيح سترته، وكم من فادح من البلاء أقلته، وكم من عثار وقيته، وكم من مكروه دفعته، وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرته. اللهم عظم بلائي، وأفرط بي سوء حالي، وقصرت بي أعمالي، وقعدت بي أغلالي، وحبسني عن نفع بعد آمالي، وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها، ونفسي بخيانتها ومطالي. يا سيدي، فأسألك بعزتك أن لا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي، ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري، ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي، ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي، وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في الأحوال كلها رؤوفا، وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي، من لي غيرك؟ أسأله كشف ضري والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي، أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي، ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي، فغرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء، فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعض حدودك، وخالفت بعض أوامرك، فلك الحجة علي في جميع ذلك، ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاؤك وألزمني فيه حكمك وبلاؤك. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي، معتذرا نادما، منكسرا مستقيلا، مستغفرا منيبا، مقرا مذعنا معترفا. لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني، ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري، وإدخالك إياي في سعة من رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري، وارحم شدة ضري، وفكني شدي وثاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، ودقة جلدي، ودقة عظمي. يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي، هبني لابتداء كرمك وسالف برك بي. يا إلهي والسيدي وربي، أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك؟ وبعدما انطوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك، ولهج به لساني من ذكرك، واعتقده ضميري من حبك، وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك، هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيته، أو تبعد من أدنيته، أو تشرد من آويته، أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمته. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدا، وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقا وبشكرك مادحا، وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققا، على ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة، وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة، وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنة. ما هكذا الظن بك، ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم يا رب، يا كريم يا رب، يا كريم يا رب. وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها، وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، وعلى أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه، قليل مكثور، يسير بقاؤه، قصير مدته، فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه، ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي فكيف بي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين؟ يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو، ولما منها أضج وأبكي؟ لأليم العذاب وشدتي، أم لطول البلاء ومدتي؟ فلئن صيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك، وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك، وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي. صبرت على عذابك، فكيف أصبر على فراقك؟ وهبني صبرت على حر نارك، فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك؟ أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجاء عفوك؟ فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا، لئن تركتني ناطقا لأضجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج الآمنين، ولأسرقن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولأبكين إليك بكاء الفاقدين، ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين، يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين، أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفتك،
وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيته وخبث بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته وهو يزج إليك زجيج مؤمل لرحمته ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك يا مولاي فكيف يبكى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمه أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك أم كيف يحركه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفها أم كيف يتكلكل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقها أم كيف تسجله زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رب أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما عملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحديك وكزيت به من إخلاد معانديك لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كان لأحد فيها مكرا ولا مقاما لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين وأن تجل صنعك كنت مبتدئا وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون إلهي سيدي فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالكزية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبته وكل قبيح أسررت وكل جهل عملت كتمته أو أعلنته أخفيته أو أظهرته وكل سيئة أمرت بأصواتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلت أو إحسان فزلت أو بر نشرت أو رزق بسطت أو ذنب تغفر أو خطأ تستر يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك ركي يا من بيده ناصيتي يا أليما بزري ومسكنتي يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب أسألك بحقك وقدسك وعظم صفاتك واسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي في الليل والنهار بذكرك مأمورا وبخدمتك موصولا وأعمالي عندك مقبولا حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا يا سيدي يا من عليه مأولي يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب قوي على خدمتك جوارحي واشدد على العزيمة جوانحي وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في التصال بخدمتك حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في البارزين وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين وأخافك مخافة الموقنين واجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فارده ومن قادني فكده واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك وأقربهم منزلة منك وأخسهم زلفة لديك فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك وجد لي بجودك وعطف علي بمجدك واحفظني برحمتك واجعلني لساني بذكرك الحجاب وقلبي بحبك متيما ومن علي بحسن إجابتك وكلني أسرتي واغفر زلتي فإنك كزيت على عبادك بعبادتك وأمرته بدعائك وزمنت لهم الإجابة فإليك يا ربي نسبت وجهي وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي وبلغني مناي ولا تعتع من فضلك رجائي واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي يا سريع الرضا يا سريع الرضا يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاحه البكاء يا سابق النعم يا دافع النكام يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام يا لمن لا يعلم صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل بي ما أنت أهله وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه. So we reached the last of the main, I would say, hadith collections. There are more hadith collections that we have, obviously, but these are the main hadith collections that we have that reflect the sunnah. So we had raw material, which was the Usul Arba'mi'ah, which was those notebooks and whatever else they would use back then to take notes from the Imams on different subjects. That was very raw material. Then along came the first three Muhammads, Muhammad al-Kulayni, Muhammad ibn Babawayh al-Saduq, and Muhammad al-Tusi. And these three, they made their first layer on top of that raw, very raw material, the Usul Arba'mi'ah. And so we had Usul al-Kafi, or not Usul al-Kafi, al-Kafi, we had Man la yahdur al-Faqih, al-Istibsar and Tahdhib, right? And we've talked about these and what needs they addressed and fulfilled. So for maybe 5-6 centuries, these were the books everyone's referring to, but it reached a point where others came along and they felt that no, we need to build another layer on top of this layer. So if these books were based on, like Al-Kafi and these ones were based on the raw material, and they were a product that was coming from that raw material, now these products themselves became raw material for the next three Muhammads who came. Muhammad al-Fayd al-Kashani, Muhammad bin Hassan al-Hur al-Amili, and what we want to discuss today, we talked about the other two already. What we want to talk about today is the great Allama Muhammad Baqir al-Majlisi. He passed away in 1110 after Hijrah. So these are all, you can say in a sense, contemporaries really. Fayd al-Kashani 1090, Hur Amili 1104, Majlisi 1110. These are contemporaries now. Once again, it's interesting, and I haven't seen the answer to this yet. It's probably because of the lack of research that I've done in this regard, but I haven't found the answer. Did these three know that each of them is doing something similar or not? Although I do have to say, they're not 100% similar. We'll talk about the differences between them as well. But yeah, I have yet to see anywhere, although I did look into a good 4 or 5 books, but I didn't find anything talking about these three knowing each other. Like, what they probably knew each other, but they hadn't looked into each other's works when they were making their own. Yes? Okay, so, yes. Oh, that's a good question. My memory is a very bad memory. Mullah Muhsin, I forget. He's buried in Kashan, from what I remember. Hur Amili is buried in Mashhad. Majlisi was buried in, his father's in Isfahan, yeah. So I think Majlisi is in Isfahan, excuse me, yeah, it's famous. It's not that they came there for burial, no, they were there for a while. Just Kashani, I remember I read his timeline, and I just forget right now. I forget where he was, the different cities that he was in. But yeah, from what I remember, he ended up in Kashan. It's a very bad memory I have. I just looked at this last week. The main Shia Hawza back then, one of the main places was Isfahan. Yeah, I would say. That's why you have all those big things going on there, because this is during the Safavid era. And the Safavids, yeah, they were, all of Iran mostly, but Hur Amili is buried in Mashhad. Majlis is in Isfahan, and you find like the works and the architecture of the likes of Sheikh Baha'i and these are all during that time. I would say Isfahan is the main place back then. But once again, my memory is not serving me properly right now, so I'll have to look into that. Anyway, so let's move to the first slide here that we have in regards to this Biharul Anwar. Now the entire title of the book is Bihar al-Anwar fi Durar al-Akhbar min A'immat al-Athhar, something like that. But yeah, obviously we refer to it as Bihar al-Anwar or just Bihar. Everyone knows this book. And we all know that this is the biggest book maybe in the whole Muslim world, not just Shia, but in the entire Muslim world. No one else has a book this big and this dense when it comes to the hadiths of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, or just hadiths in general. So till Allama Majlisi, it says that the major collections were fiqhi ones. Either you had Al-Wafi or you had Wasa'il al-Shia, right? These are the two other major works of that era. These are fiqhi ones mostly. Now, Al-Wafi, what he did was, he said, I want to make things easier, so I'm going to bring all 4 books, Al-Kutub al-Arba'a, into one book. To the point that he even brought the non-fiqhi hadiths that are in Usul al-Kafi and in Ar-Rawda of al-Kafi, he brought those into his work as well, Al-Wafi. So it's mostly fiqhi because those 4 books are mostly fiqhi. But whatever else those books also have that is non-fiqhi, he also brought. So what his point is, what he's trying to do is, he's trying to bring all 4 of these books. That's all he's doing. He's not looking outside of these 4 books, number 1. Number 2, he is being inclusive of non-fiqhi matters as well. Because one of these 4 books, which is Al-Kafi, also contains non-fiqhi ahadith. On the flip side, Wasa'il al-Shi'a, what he did was, he said, no, I want to bring all the fiqhi hadiths. My main goal is the fiqh, the ahkam, the do's and don'ts. And so his main books are also the 4 books. But guess what? He doesn't touch the usul part of Al-Kafi. He doesn't touch the Ar-Rawda part of Al-Kafi. Okay? In addition to that, he brings about 70, 80, we went up to like 160 or 180, some people have said, other books that he uses as well. But these are also only for the fiqhi part. Okay, so Wasa'il al-Shi'a is the go-to fiqhi book for fiqh and Bahath Kharij and all these things. I said this before. It's the book right now, the book. Now, what does Bihar do? Bihar says, I want to. He's like, you know what? And this is a little sign and clue that he knew about Wasa'il, he knew about Al-Wafi. He says, look, what I am seeing is that there's works that have compiled all the fiqhi hadiths. But I look around and I see there's a ton of other books that we have on other matters of Islam, non-fiqhi. Yeah, they're not related to fiqh. I want to bring all of that together. Okay. And so the same problem, he says, that we have, what caused Al-Wafi and Wasa'il to do what they did? What caused them to do what they did is they say, okay, I want to look up a certain rule on Hajj. A certain part of Tawaf or something, a certain rule about Tawaf. I have to go open up Al-Kafi. Then I have to open up Man La Yahdur. Then I have to open up Tahdib Istibsar. It's scattered. It's not in one place. It's hard. So let me do that. Let's put this all in one place. Now, Majlisi, he says, you did that for fiqh. I want to do that for non-fiqh. All of the different hadiths that we have out there, I'm going to bring them all together. That's why he says, seldom is one able to access all the hadiths pertaining to a certain topic. And this might be the reason people have turned away from hadiths and don't have much interest in them. So I've said this again and again. You see, Kulayni, Thaqih, when you read the introductions or the prefaces to these books, you find that they're complaining that the people are away from the hadiths. Or they're confused and there's conflicting hadiths and so on. Here, when you look at Majlisi, he's saying the exact same thing. Like, the people never get better, it seems. He says the people aren't interested in hadith. The reason for that is probably because they're all scattered all over the place. So someone wants to look up something on Ma'ad, resurrection. Someone wants to look up something about Barzakh, for example. Yeah, they have to go look in 40 different books of hadith that we have out there. He says, I'm going to consolidate all of this, bring it all into one place, Bihar al-Anwar. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Now, this Bihar, because it has touched on all of these different hadiths, it becomes like a small library. A library all in one place. Okay? It says here, now when you look in the preface of Majlisi to Bihar, he mentions all of the books that he uses in the preface. You're just like going on and on and on. All these books and titles. It's pretty neat, actually. It's pretty interesting. The amount of work that he put into this. So here it says that it mentions 365 Shi'i hadith books. All right, this isn't just fiqh anymore. This is everything. Some of the things that you find there are actually pretty gharib and ajib and strange and interesting. Some of the stuff. We'll talk about that maybe a little bit. So he says that 365 Shia books that he's narrated here, and also treatises of history and hadith. Okay, so it's not just hadith books. There'll be like a little treatise that's like maybe 10 pages. He uses that as well. That has hadiths in it. But all in all, it says here 600 plus works have been used for this Bihar al-Anwar. Some of them are Sunni, but he does make it a point. He says, I don't narrate from those books. The only time I will bring them is for ihtijaj purposes. If I want to bring a hujjah, an argument against the Ahlul Sunnah regarding a certain matter, I'll bring their hadiths. But it's not like I'm narrating them here so that I preserve them necessarily. That's beyond the scope of what I'm after. I'm after preservation of the Shi'i sources and hadiths, and I want to bring them all in one place. And so he says that, or they say, that because of this, there's a bunch of little books here and there that we've had that now we don't have access to the manuscripts anymore. But because he did the work and brought them into this big little library of his, which is called Bihar al-Anwar, you have access to these books now. You have access to these hadiths. He's preserved these works through Bihar al-Anwar. Because back then, I've said this before kind of, back then, if you had a little manuscript here, a little manuscript there, how many times is that going to be transcribed before it's lost? Yeah, we don't have photocopy machines back there. We don't have public publishers and publications and so on. We don't have the printing industry back then, right? If a book is lucky to survive, it's because there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 manuscripts of it, that others have transcribed. So if you're not a very important book, guess what? You're not going to last long, okay? Unless someone important takes that book and puts it into an important work called Bihar al-Anwar, for example. And Bihar is a work that is transcribed a lot, and we'll talk about this later as well, inshallah. Yeah, so a number of these books, manuscripts, they don't exist anymore, but no sweating that because Bihar has preserved them through its manuscripts. And so Imam Khomeini, he says this, he says Bihar al-Anwar is a collection of almost 400 books and treatises, and in reality is a small library. So apparently he's coined that term, small library, with one name, Bihar al-Anwar. The author took notice of how many hadith books were becoming subject to destruction due to their small size and passing of time. He gathered all of these in a collection called Bihar al-Anwar without necessarily being strict in regards to their authenticity. So Imam Khomeini here is somewhat letting us know what the point of all this was. Don't get upset, people, if he's not very strict when it comes to the Rijali standards that we have. Although I do want to say they say that all three of these Muhammads, these later Muhammads, Faith Kashani, Hur'amili, Majlisi, they are moderate akhbaris, they call them. Okay, they're not very staunch akhbaris like, for example, Al-Astarabadi and stuff that we might talk about later, in sometime later. But they're not like that, but they're moderate akhbaris. So Imam Khomeini is saying, look, yeah, they might not be as strict, but there's a point in all of this. And that's something also we'll touch on a little bit later. All right, let's move on now to the organization of this book, how it's organized. This book, it's 25, this encyclopedia, let's call it, is made up of 25 books. Okay, each book for a certain topic, and we'll get to each of those separately later. Now, these 25 books back then, so for example, you'll have a book of Tawheed, book of Adl, book of this, book of that, okay? These books, they are in 25 volumes. Initially, when the work was done, Majlisi, he dedicated a volume to each topic. Nowadays, though, because of all the research that's been done on this, all the notes, everything, references, and all the different citations, this has reached 110 volumes. Bihar al-Anwar is 110 volumes now. Okay, so that's there is no hadith book out there that's 110 volumes. Think about it. You have 12 imams in addition to the Prophet that you narrate hadiths from, that you say are a source of immaculate knowledge. So of course you're going to have a lot more hadiths, although they're not all authentic, but we'll talk about that. Yes. Yeah, so you're saying how did 25 turn into 110? Where did all this excess come from? Yeah, did they add stuff? Well, first of all, if you look at the volumes, they're thin. The 110 volumes, they're very thin. Yeah, so it's not like they added a ton of hadith to it. No, that's number one. Number two, back then, the books back then were different than the books now. the books back then, one volume of those 25 was probably very thick and very big. Even back in our days in the Hawza, if you were studying, for example, fiqh, and you were using the book of Al-Lum'ah, yeah, Lum'ah was like this tall. Okay, now the books are like little shorty and smaller size. Back then they were big and they were wide, and there was writing in the margins, and sometimes we would call it the Farmuni books. Like it's like a wheel that you're like reading. The notes aren't all just written like this. The text, one of it is going this way, another one's going this way. So you have to like turn it like a wheel, like a steering wheel. You have to turn it to read it. It was so dense, and it's so hard to navigate the pages. So that plus, yes, there is a lot of footnotes. There's a lot of research that has been done as well. Yeah, even a new one came out a few years ago. It's still 110 volumes, but then the volumes are not thin anymore. They're thicker because there's even been more research that's been done. So there's a lot of notes and footnotes that they all add. Yeah, but rest assured that it's not like they added tons of hadiths in the footnotes. No. I would say that, because if there are any hadiths out there that you can kind of rely on, I say kind of for a reason. Majlisi has already brought it in Bihar. That's why it's Bihar al-Anwar. So it's not like you can find other hadiths out there that, you can, that he might have missed or something. Although we do have Sheikh Abbas Qummi and he has Safinatul Bihar. But I don't want to get into that right now. Okay, anyway, think about it. You have Bihar al-Anwar, and then Sheikh Abbas Qummi writes something called Safinatul Bihar, the ship that you use to navigate Bihar al-Anwar. All right, so these 25 volumes, now they're 110. He, unlike Hur al-Amili, Hur al-Amili took out verses. He didn't bring verses in the beginning of every book and chapter. But what he has done is he's really trying to make an encyclopedia, Allama Majlisi. So each book begins with relevant Quranic verses and the tafsir of those verses. One cool thing about Majlisi's work is that he will have a lot of commentary and tafsir himself. Although we'll talk about that a little bit later too, of what people think about that. But all in all, yeah, he has a lot of notes on the hadiths and verses of the Quran. Each book has chapters under it. So if there's 25 books, for example, the book of Tawheed, it's not like you have a ton of hadiths under it. No, you have sub-chapters and chapters under it as well. So each book has chapters. For example, the book of the heavens and world, As-Sama' wal-Ard, or no, As-Sama' wal-Alam, Kitab As-Sama'i wal-Alam, which has to do with a lot of different things that we'll talk about also later. That has 210 chapters under it. So it's the book of As-Sama' wal-Alam. Under that book of Sama' wal-Alam, 200 chapters, which might have its own subcategories and hundreds of hadiths under those, yeah? Or for example, the book of our Prophet, 72 chapters under it. Okay. How many chapters all in all? 2,489 according to this count that we have here, that you have in Bihar al-Anwar. 2,489 chapters, which has its own subcategories and hadiths under it and so on. And sometimes the entire hadith and sometimes only relevant parts of the hadiths are mentioned. And he says, I did this. Why? Or others say he did this. I think he says it in the preface himself, that he did this so that, it doesn't get too big of a book. Like who wants 150 volumes instead of 110? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So anyway, that's how this book is organized and set up. Let's move on to books now. These books, what are they? I'm going to read. This is the Arabic. I'm going to go through this very quickly because as Shia, this is the encyclopedia that we have, right? So just to get familiar with what kind of topics. It's fiqhi and non-fiqhi. But as I said, it seems that his main focus was the non-fiqhi. I mean, it brings the fiqhi as well, but he doesn't narrate much from the four main books. He narrates from other books, which is interesting. Okay, so we'll get to some of those notes as well later, inshallah. Kitab al-Aqli wal-Ilmi wal-Jahl. Yeah, the book of intellect, knowledge, and ignorance. Kitab al-Tawheed. Kitab al-Adl, justice, ma'ad, resurrection. Ihtijajat, munadarat, jawami' al-ulum. The different discussions and debates and arguments that have taken place and can happen or have happened in the past, the imams and the ihtijajat and the arguments that they have had with others and how they would argue and their reasoning that they would have with others. Qisasul Anbiya, stories of the prophets, and then the tariq and history of our prophet, and then the book of Imamah, yeah, and about them, Jawami'u Ahwalihim, the things about them and the history and their sunnah and so on. Kitabul Fitan. Remember this one, we'll talk about it a little bit later. Kitabul Fitan, the fitnas, and what happened after the Prophet, and the usurpation of Khilafah, and the battles of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. The next one, the history of Imam Ali alayhi salam, his fada'il, his ahwal. Next one, Fatima alayhi salam, Hassan, Hussein alayhi salam, their history, their fada'il, their miracles. Next one, next slide. The history of the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th Imam, their fada'il, their mu'jizat. The next one is the history of Imam al-Rida alayhi salam, Imam al-Jawad, the 9th Imam, 10th Imam, 11th Imam, their ahwal, their mu'jizat, their miracles, all of that in the 12th volume. 13, Kitabul Ghaiba. Okay, so this one is about the 12th Imam in particular. Al-Ghaiba, and all about the Hujjah, the 12th Imam alayhi salam. Then number 14, this is the one I said, Kitabus Sama'i wal Alam. The heavens and I would say like the world or the earth or whatever. What is in that book though? He says, يَشْتَمِلُ عَلَى أَحْوَالِ الْعَرْشِ, the throne of Allah, the kursi, the seat, the aflaq, and a lot of different things, yeah? The skies and what's there, and elements, and the malaika, and the jinn, and the human being, and the beasts, and the birds, and all these different things you will find there. And then abwab al-tib as well, yeah, medicine. If we have hadiths that are attributed to the imams. Now, of course, we've talked about this before. There's a lot of controversy surrounding some of the things that are in this, but yeah, we don't need to get into that. Number 15, Kitabul Iman wal Kufr, Makarimul Akhlaq. So this is more of an akhlaqi book, number 15. And then number 16 also, Kitabul Adab, the etiquettes and the sunan, do's and don'ts and kaba'ir. What are the great sins? You know, what hadiths do we have about the great sins? Yeah, all of that is mentioned in there, and some of the punishments for the great sins. Punishments in this life, if an Islamic judge, I guess, you know, carries those out. Kitab al-Rawda, number 17, is miscellaneous. You know, you have stories in there, you have wisdom, you have kind of like the Rawda of Al-Kafi. And then this is where the fiqh starts, number 18 onwards. Tahara, Salat, Quran, Dua, Zakat, Som, Hajj, Mazar. Mazar is du'as and these kinds of things, I would say, and ziyarat and all of those things. Kitab al-Uqud, Iqa'at, transactions, whether they're unilateral, bilateral. Kitab al-Ahkam is also, I'm guessing it has to do with Islamic qada and judgment and, you know, the judiciary and all of that. And then number 25, Kitab al-Ijazat, all of the permissions he had. Because we've talked about this before. How were books back then transmitted from one person to another? You didn't copy paste a PDF and send it over. And so you knew it's coming from so-and-so because it came from so-and-so on my WhatsApp. No. Back then, you would read the book to somebody else, or you would give it to them and you would sign off on it saying that this book I gave to this person, and this person, yeah, read this book in my presence, and so on. Read it to me and I say that whatever they've read is right. It was like this. So, Majlisi, you're putting together 25 volumes, which is 110 volumes today, of hadiths and books that you are narrating. Where did you get the permission for these? He says, I'm going to bring them in volume number 25. Volume 25, that's 1/25 of Bihar, the old Bihar. 1/25 of it is just the permissions he had, which I think today is like 3 or 4 volumes of the 110 volumes. Just ijazat. Now here, people will read these, the ones who are more into these kinds of discussions of Rijal and Ijazat. There's a lot of precious gems in there of getting an idea of how things worked back then. The system and processes of transmission of books and hadith and so on. It's all there. All right, so that is these 25 volumes. Okay, moving on now to some of the problems that some have, said regarding this book. Okay, 3 of them I put here. First thing, obviously, it's weak. It has weak sources. Yeah. Bihar, I'm not sure. Maybe it has some parts, maybe it hasn't, but I was actually thinking about this the other day. I don't remember if it has. Yeah. Can you guys look up thaqalain.net, see if it's there? I highly doubt if it's there. It's not there, yeah. I did a little quick search actually, I think, and I didn't find anything. Yeah. And it might be better if Bihar is not translated to English. Okay. No? The whole thing? Oh, actually, I remember there was an old print of it. I remember that was a translation of Bihar. I don't know if it was all of it or if it was some of it. I don't remember. Yeah. Yeah, that one. Like 80 something of them have been translated, right? Yeah, it's online somewhere, and I've seen the physical, hard copy of those translations as well. I've seen it before. Yeah. I don't remember who's done it. Yeah. But it's easy. We'll check after and we can see who's done that. Yeah. Weak sources is the first one. Yeah, people say, look, Bihar is weak because the sources, lots of them aren't very strong, or a good number of them aren't very strong. Sayyid Muhsin al-Amin, the great, he says, it is clear that his works require further refinement and order, for they contain both weak and strong hadith. You see, he doesn't hate on the book. He says, yes, it does need further refinement, yeah, if you want to really rely on this one. Okay, so that's important. And we've talked about this before. So what if there are weak sources? Still, this can be used as a complement to other works and books that we have. Yeah? So assuming that, now no one says Bihar, all of it is weak. But yeah, there will be a lot of weak stuff in there too. And so it is something that you have to have the skills to comb through. Otherwise, you will get in trouble. You can't just rely on Bihar only. And we'll talk about this a little bit later as well. Yeah, so no need to cast it aside. It is a very, very important work, but you can't build ideology based on the mutafarridat, as they say, of this work. Mutafarridat means the only things that you can only find in there and nowhere else. Yeah? There will be a certain thing you'll find only in Bihar, you won't find it in Al-Kafi, although Al-Kafi has a lot of what makes us Shia within it. The main beliefs of the Shia are there. But you won't find it there, you find it in Bihar though. Well, that should be enough of something that you put a question mark at least. You don't build ideology based on Bihar and the likes of Bihar, is what I'm trying to say. But when you go out online today, on social media especially, when they're fighting and these super Shias and super Sunnis on Twitter and whatnot, they're fighting each other, what you'll see is that, lots of times, not the best sources are being cited to make an argument. Anyway, another thing that they've pointed out is repetition. They say that so much repetition is in there to the point that if you were to take the repeated hadiths out, 20 of these 110 volumes wouldn't be there anymore. So Bihar wouldn't be 110. It would be only 90 volumes. Yes? Yeah, I'm guessing when they say repetition here, what they mean by repetition isn't something that, a piece of it is here, a piece of it is there. No, the same wording of the same part you'll find in more than one place. Now, it might be an entire hadith, it might not be an entire hadith, it might be part of a hadith. But all in all, repetition means it's the same one that was mentioned somewhere else. Yeah. Oh, is it intentional? I think he's doing that, for a reason. He's doing that for a reason. Wasa'il might also have this problem. At the end of the day, if something is mentioned once in volume number 40, when I'm looking in volume number 80, I'm not going to know if it was there in volume number 40 as well, It's good to repeat, in my opinion, sometimes. So, yeah, you can, as a matter of fact, some have said this is not an actual issue of the book. It's not an issue. It's actually a good thing. I'm not going to lie. When you're going through, for example, Tafsir al-Mizan, when you're going through it, Tabatabai says this all the time. He'll say, as was discussed before. Well, at least tell me where it was discussed before. It's not this, you can't find it. It's very important. I want to know where it is. And that's why these tahqiqat and researches happen on these books, because there's a lot of these dots that have to be connected that we can't connect, because I can't go through 40 volumes or 50 volumes just to find something. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So repetition is the second one, but we can answer that one. Number 3, lackluster explanation and tafsirs. If you remember, I said we'll talk about this later. Here, this is what I'm talking about. Lackluster tafsirs and explanations is something that we have to understand that just because it's lackluster doesn't mean it has no value. Once again, what we have to understand is that, okay, you're trying to finish an encyclopedia, and I'll tell you later that Majlisi, poor guy, didn't finish it actually. They finished it after his death. So you're trying to finish this in time, and you want to also add your sharh to everything as well, you're not going to have enough time to do like deep tahqiq and research into everything. You won't be able to. So he's done his part, I would say. I don't see this as a big issue either. Yeah, just because Majlisi has an understanding and interpretation doesn't mean it's right necessarily. He's not ma'soom. So we will critique if we need to, just like we critique everybody else. But it doesn't mean that it's valueless now, it's worthless now, no. So that's the third one that you have there. But the main one usually is that people will say, oh, weak sources. But brothers and sisters, if we know how to use Bihar, what its functionality is supposed to be, this shouldn't be an issue, in my opinion at least, either. Now, let's move on to some of the notes that we have here now on Bihar as we wrap up. Bihar, he never said, I don't want to bring fiqh in it. But at the same time, he doesn't usually narrate from the 4 main books of hadith that we have. Probably he knew that others have already done that work. Because of this, Bihar al-Anwar is not one of those main books, or you won't find anyone ever quoting Bihar in Dars Kharij, for example. Those advanced lessons in the Hawza of fiqh and usul, you won't find anybody make any reference to Bihar al-Anwar, because of this. Some have said it's because he doesn't narrate from those 4 main books. I want to say that even if he had narrated from the 4 main books, this still doesn't seem like they would have used that one. They would have still stuck to Wasa'il probably. But yeah, all in all, that's number 1. Limited use of the 4 books of fiqh has made this Bihar not be seen as something that is to be used for fiqh at all. I don't remember it ever being mentioned in Bahath Kharij, no. Number 2, citing from Bihar isn't a big deal. Yeah, why? Because, first of all, and this is something that has to do with all 3 of those second or those later hadith collections of Wasa'il, of Wafi, of Bihar. No one really, even if someone references them, cites them, you know they're getting it from another book. That's one of the original sources, like Kafi and Faqih and these ones, right? Now, Bihar, in addition to you knowing that it's coming from somewhere else, you know that it's lots of times it might not be coming from a strong source either, okay? Which adds to the reason for one to have to do more research on it. So what I'm trying to say is, if you're reading something and it says, oh, we have this and that, and then you look in the footnote, it says Bihar al-Anwar. Where did Bihar get it from? That's the first question that should come to someone's mind. Where is Bihar narrating it from? At the end of the day, it's a secondary source. Secondary doesn't take value from it. It just means that it's not one of the primary original sources where you don't ask where did he get it from. You just look at the chain of narrators, and you break it down from there. Bihar, you can do one of 2 things, because Bihar brings the chain of narrators. You can look at the chain that Bihar has brought, or just look at the book it's bringing it from and then go look at that book and see what the chain is there over there. But all in all, Bihar is not going to be something that when you see it, oh, Bihar al-Anwar, no questions asked. We don't have that. But once again, you look in certain books, sometimes you see, oh, it says Bihar al-Anwar. So what if it says Bihar al-Anwar, this is the most you can get from that. The most you can get from it is, okay, we have this in a Shi'i hadith book somewhere. That's all you can get from it. Anything more than that, you'll have to ascertain and establish. Okay. Number 3, Tabataba'i's notes on Bihar. And we have a whole story here now. I've talked about this a little bit before as well. The first 6, 7, maybe 8 volumes of Bihar, depending on the print. From what I remember, it was 6, but some have said 7. The first 6 or 7 volumes of Bihar, this 110 volume print of it, it has something very valuable in the footnotes. And those are the notes of Tabatabai. Which, let me open a parenthesis here real quick. Yeah? Tabatabai, he put footnotes and commentary on Bihar. That says a lot about this book. Okay? That it can be seen as a positive or negative. I want to say the positive aspect. If this book was a worthless book, he wouldn't waste his time putting a commentary or footnotes under it. He wouldn't. which shows that he feels that this is a valuable book. And this is what I'm trying to say. Because yeah, there's a lot of bihar hate out there. And me personally, as well, I'm going to be someone who's very critical as well. But once again, being critical is one thing. Yeah? Double checking sources is one thing, but not giving value to something is something else. You don't laugh at a book like this. You don't ignore a book like this. No, you look into it, but then you have to have the skills to sift through it and be careful. And that's why I say maybe it's not good maybe it's not a good idea to translate it to English necessarily, although we found out that 80-something volumes of it have been translated. It's fine, whatever. Because why? Because people will cite it as a primary source of knowledge and information, not necessarily the case, but doesn't take away from the value of it. Tabatabai, he goes to this. Why didn't Tabatabai do this on other books? Although he does have notes on Al-Kafi, yeah? But why would he put time on this one if it wasn't valuable in and of itself? No, there's stuff there that you won't find in other books. Now, I do have to say this though. Why did he stop at volume number 6 or volume number 7? Because some have said these aren't even notes. These are his critiques in the footnotes of the understanding of Al-Majlisi vis-a-vis the hadith that he has brought. Majlisi will bring, and those first volumes, what were they? The first volumes, they were about al-aql, wal-ilm, wal-jahl, tawheed, adl, ma'ad, these things. Okay, so with these, the hadith sometimes are going to be very deep and profound. And sometimes we'll need a good philosophical background to understand what's being said, at least according to Tabatabai. And so you will find a clash in these notes where Tabatabai is clashing with, respectfully of course, with Majlisi and his understanding of certain, and explanation of certain hadiths, and saying, look, and now once or twice, yeah, it gets a little rough too. Tabatabai, he won't be the akhlaqi, quiet individual you know of him. Tabatabai will go out of his way. When it comes to tahrif al-Quran, there's two critiques that he has to Majlisi, because Majlisi is leaning towards tahrif and alteration of Quran. Yeah, Tabatabai kind of gets a little bit harsh over there, they say. But all in all, there's a book that's been written on this, and there's maybe other ones too, but the one that I've seen, it's called Naqd-e Allama Tabatabai be Allama Majlisi. Naqd. So they've taken out those footnotes, they made another book, and they've added their own notes to it, but they've called it the critiques of Tabatabai towards Majlisi. Not notes of Tabatabai on Bihar, no. Critiques on Majlisi. Forget about Bihar. So you can tell he is actually critiquing the understanding of Majlisi usually. And these are very precious footnotes that he has there in regards to these topics that he has discussed. Anyway, they stopped him from, adding these notes to Bihar. It's not like Allama Tabatabai stopped on his own at volume 6 or 7. No. It reached the point where, now according to other scholars, they say that Burujerdi said, this is before the revolution, Burujerdi told him that I think you should stop. Because Majlisi is really on a pedestal for certain people, and you can't sound like you're trying to take him down. He's like, no, this is knowledge. Imam al-Sadiq is higher than Majlisi, he said. I'm not going to change anything in how I do it. If you're not going to change, then you got to stop. The publisher said, look, we're not going to publish this anymore if you're going to put your notes under it, so he stopped. Tone it down a little bit. He said, I'm not going to tone it down. I have more respect for Imam al-Sadiq versus Majlisi. If Majlisi is not explaining something the way he should, I'm going to let him know and let the world know that this is not what Imam al-Sadiq was trying to say. Imam al-Sadiq was saying something much deeper. Yeah? But no, they couldn't handle that, and so they stopped. Not taking shots at anybody. This is just how scholarship is, and then this is how sometimes those who are in charge of the Hawza, for example, they feel that there are certain things that are more important than others, and so they will, get in the way of certain things. Anyway, that's the story of Tabatabai's notes on Bihar. The off-limits volumes. Volumes 29, 30, and 31 of Al-Bihar al-Anwar. They are controversial. And if you go to the old print or the original one, it's going to be volume number 8, Kitab al-Fitan. These volumes, for those who don't know, they're known for the things that you find there against the first three. Okay, and it gets very ugly. Now, before the revolution, Ayatollah Burujerdi, someone came to him, one of the Shia ulama who was in Misr and Egypt, comes to him and pitches this idea of we need to have a little bit more taqreeb and unity. And well, taqreeb means to bring two things close together, okay, and getting along and dialogue and so on. We need to have this with Al-Azhar University, and so Burujerdi, he likes the idea, and he pushes for this idea. Now, one of those impediments to this idea materializing and reaching fruition was these volumes of Bihar. Now, let me open a little parenthesis here. Personally, I feel that this is one of those places where there's a lot of reason for there to be fabricated material. This is one of those, it's mahal al-tuhma, they call it. That this is one of those places where, like no one's going to come and make up some hadith about, I don't know, eating strawberries. There's nothing in it for them unless they sell strawberries, obviously. But you know what I'm trying to say, right? Make up a hadith about cactuses or cacti, as they say. But when it comes to the first three khulafa, there's a lot of reason for a Shia or for some people who are critical of them to say certain things. I'm not saying everything in there is fabricated. No, I don't know. I haven't looked into it. What I'm trying to say is there is good reason for someone to do that. Anyway, Burujerdi, he, through the help of, now according to the reports that I read, through the help of the Shah of the time, he got that signature for this part of Bihar to not be published and printed anymore. Okay? After the revolution, the half of it was printed. Half of volume 8 was printed, and that was the part that had to do with imamah. But the part that had to do with the fitan and the mata'in, as they call it. Mata'in comes from ta'an. When you want to take a shot at somebody, put a dent in something, you do ta'an of it. When you stick a spear into something, it's ta'an. So the mata'in is a plural. The mata'in of the first three, that part still wasn't printed. But somebody, went ahead and did research on that part, printed it in Beirut. Darul Adwa it's called. It's one of those publishers there. So they've printed those volumes, 29, 30, and 31. I remember back then, they would say those are the black volumes that not everyone has. Yeah. So, but if it's printed in Iran, you won't find those things being printed still, as far as I know. Okay, so those are the off-limits volumes. A few more points and we'll end. These are quick ones. Bihar al-Anwar is not just the work of Majlisi. Or excuse me, that's another point I want to make. But for now, this isn't the only work of Majlisi. I read somewhere it said 160 works he had also. Bihar al-Anwar, if I get lucky, I go through all of Bihar throughout my lifetime. Yeah? Once. If even. In addition to Bihar, he has 160 other works. One of them, for example, is Mir'atul Uqul, precious work of his, which is a commentary on Usul al-Kafi that we still use today, and it's a very valuable work. Mir'atul Uqul. Okay, that's just one of them. 160 Farsi and Arabic works that he has. So Bihar is not the only one. Like, look at how much tawfiq this individual had. In addition to that, it was a group effort, this Bihar. It's not just his work. So he had delegations, he had groups, he had students under him. And some of these famous figures, they were his students that were helping him in the writing of this book. And he would send people to the east and the west, he says. Yeah? East to west to get their hands on whatever manuscripts they can. Bring them all, consolidate, see the reliability, see the ijazat for them, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of work being put by groups and teams here. And so they say he did have the help of the government. Yeah, the king of his time, the Shah of his time, the Safavid Shah of his time, and some of the financial support that was there. But some have said no, but he did also use a lot of his own funding, personal as well, for this work. It's obvious that he did that as well. But, as I said, the work wasn't completed until he died. Now, how was it not completed? The 25 volumes, what they would do is, it's not like they waited for all 25 to be done and then they put them all out at once. No. Every time a volume was done, the rough draft was there, they would make a final copy of it and they would publish it, and manuscripts would be made off of that. So in other words, they would photocopy it as if. Okay? And so that would be distributed and people would have access to it. So one by one, 15 out of these 25 were put out like that during his lifetime. But after he passed away, the other 10, were left for after he died. And that's why they say when you look at the notes, those 10 volumes, they don't have his notes too much anymore. Much less information that from him in those other ones. Now, it doesn't mean that volume 1 to 15 was like this, and then 16 onwards, you don't have that. No, some of these, they weren't published in order. Yeah? They weren't published in order. Some came sooner than the other ones, but all in all, out of the 25, he was only alive for 15 of them to actually come out and reach the people. Okay, so this is Biharul Anwar, brothers and sisters. This is the last of those encyclopedias, collections, whatever you want to call them. The first 3 Muhammads, the second 3 Muhammads, and all of the work that they did for Tashayyu', Shi'ism, Islam, for it to reach us. And here we are now and discussing them. With that, we end this part of the Sunnah. There are some more discussions to have about Sunnah. I'm going to leave those for next time, obviously. Some of the things that we skipped, just so you know what they are. I'm going to go over those, inshallah, in our next session. And then with that, we'll move on from Sunnah to probably the different eras of Ijtihad and fiqh that we've had. The era of Shaykh al-Tusi, how long did it last? What were the main points there and the main things that were happening in that era? And, all the way to the Sayyid al-Khuis and the Hawza of Qom that came after Ha'iri Yazdi and so on. So we'll leave all of that for, inshallah, for the future sessions. Any questions before we end? No? Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Salawat. السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام على الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة. السلام على 9 المعصومين من ولد الحسين. السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب الزمان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.